All right, let's dive into the latest earnings report from the furniture company Lovesac. And I promise you, this is way more interesting than just a bunch of numbers. It's actually a fascinating story about how we're all shopping right now. And believe me, there are some real surprises in here.
So here's the big question this whole thing boils down to. It's the central puzzle of Lovesac's quarter, and it really gets at this huge split we're seeing in how people are spending their money. This one question sets up everything we're about to unpack.
And that leads us right here, because if you just glanced at Lovesac's main sales number, you'd probably think, pretty quiet quarter. But just under the surface, there's this really dramatic tug of war happening between two totally different ways of shopping.
And here's that quiet, surface-level number. Total net sales, basically flat, up just a tiny 0.2% to about $115 million. Looks kind of boring, right? Well, trust me, this number is hiding the real story.
And bam, here it is. This is wild. You can see this massive split. Sales in their physical stores, their showrooms, just exploded, up almost 13%. But at the exact same time, their internet sales completely fell off a cliff, dropping by nearly 17%. It's a huge signal that for a big purchase like a couch, people are wanting to go back and, actually sit on it first.
So with a split that dramatic, let's dig into the good news first. What in the world was the secret sauce behind this incredible growth in their actual physical stores?
Now this is the really crucial part. The growth wasn't just coming from their existing stores suddenly selling more stuff. Nope. The main engine here was pure expansion. They opened 17 brand new showrooms. In fact, if you look at the stores that were already open, their sales actually dipped just a tiny bit. So it was the strategy of physically opening more doors that gave them that big 12.8% jump.
Okay, so sales in stores are up. Great news, right? Well, not so fast, because sales are only half the story. The other half is profitability. And this is where the company really started to feel the pressure from a few different directions. And it wasn't just about that drop in online sales. This number right here is the headline for that squeeze. It says their gross margin shrank by 240 basis points. Now, basis points is just a fancy finance term. 100 basis points is 1%. So what this really means is that their profit on the products they sell, it dropped by 2.4 percentage points compared to last year. So the next question is, why?
Well, it was kind of like a perfect storm of rising costs. It costs more to get their products shipped in because of transportation and tariffs. Then it costs more to store all that inventory in warehouses. And on top of that, they had to spend more on advertising to get customers in the door. Every single one of these things eats away at your profit.
And the cost pressure didn't even stop there. The basic cost of just keeping the lights on, we're talking about things like paying employees, paying rent for all those new showrooms, that also went up. And what's more, it actually grew faster than their sales did, putting even more of a squeeze on the company's finances. So let's recap. You've got one part of the business doing great, another part tanking, and costs are going up pretty much everywhere. So what happens when you throw all of that into a blender? What does the final number, the actual profit or loss for the quarter, look like? Okay, before we see the final number, we just have to quickly touch on this term, adjusted EBITDA. It sounds super complicated, but it's really not. Think of it as a way for a company to show its core health, by kind of stripping away all the weird accounting and financing stuff. It just gives you a clearer apples-to-apples picture of how the actual business is performing.
And yikes. The final numbers tell a pretty stark story. The company's net loss more than doubled. It went from just under $5 million last year all the way to over $10 million this quarter. All those rising costs and that big drop in online sales hit the bottom line, and they hit it hard.
So after a really tough quarter like that, what's the game plan? How is Lovesac looking at the future, and what's the strategy to get back on track?
This is basically Lovesac reading the room. They're looking out at the economy and saying, hey, we get it. People are being really careful with their money right now. They're hunting for deals and watching every dollar. And that understanding is shaping their whole strategy going forward.
Now, even with that tough Q3, they're not pessimistic. In fact, their forecast for the rest of the year is pretty confident. They're expecting a huge rebound in the fourth quarter, getting back to being very profitable, and actually ending the entire year with a positive net income. They're betting big on a strong holiday season.
And this is really interesting. Remember how the big growth driver was opening new stores? Well, it looks like they're tapping the brakes. After adding 17 new showrooms in 9 months, they're planning to open only about 10 in the entire next fiscal year. It's a clear move to get a handle on those rising costs for rent and payroll that we saw earlier.
And this quote from their CFO really says it all. He's essentially telling investors, look, don't get spooked by one challenging quarter. We are playing the long game here. They're signaling that despite the short-term bumps, their focus is still locked on building the brand for the future.
And all of this leaves us with one final, huge question. Lovesac's own numbers show that people are still flocking to physical stores for big purchases. But in an economy where everyone is hunting for a deal, is doubling down on the expensive, high-touch, in-person shopping experience the winning play for the long run? That's the puzzle that Lovesac, and honestly the entire retail world, is trying to solve right now.